It was a quiet afternoon in the vast savanna forest, where the golden light of the setting sun painted everything in shades of yellow and orange. The cool breeze that swept through the tall grass seemed to whisper secrets, its subtle rustling hiding the tension that lay beneath the peaceful surface. In the distance, the trees swayed gently, their branches reaching up to the heavens, casting long shadows across the ground. The air was still, but there was an undeniable sense of alertness in the atmosphere. Leo, a young deer, wandered through the forest alone. His slender body, still growing and delicate, moved cautiously among the bushes and undergrowth. His dark brown fur blended seamlessly with the earth around him. But there was an undeniable innocence about him, an innocence that made him vulnerable. His large, dark eyes flickered with uncertainty as he moved, unsure of what lay ahead. The rhythmic crunching of leaves under his hooves was the only sound that accompanied him. Leo had been alone for weeks now. His mother, the one who had always kept him safe and showed him the ways of the wild, was no longer with him. She had been taken by a predator in a savage attack that left Leo scarred both physically and emotionally. It had been a brutal encounter, and the memory of that day haunted him, flashing in his mind whenever he felt too still or too quiet. The forest had become a strange place without her. It was once a home, a sanctuary, where he had felt safe and protected. Now, it felt like a labyrinth of danger and uncertainty. The other animals he had once seen as companions seemed distant, unapproachable, or worse, hostile. The predators that roamed the land were ever present in his mind, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Despite all this, Leo had no choice but to keep moving. The hunger in his stomach gnawed at him, and the fear in his heart pushed him forward. He had learned to listen to the sounds of the forest, the calls of the birds, the rustling of the trees, and the low growls that indicated the presence of something dangerous nearby. As he moved deeper into the forest, Leo was unaware of the eyes watching him. From the cover of a thick clump of trees, a pair of sleek, yellow eyes tracked his every move. A lioness, her fur blending seamlessly with the golden grass, lay in wait, her muscles tensed and ready to pounce. She had been watching Leo for some time, her patience a deadly asset in the pursuit of prey. The lioness had noticed the young deer several days ago, and it had become an obsession. The deer's vulnerability was like an irresistible invitation to a predator. She knew that, alone and frightened, Leo would be easy prey. She could feel her hunger, an instinctual drive to feed and survive, gnawing at her, but she also knew the importance of waiting for the perfect moment. She had learned that patience often meant the difference between a successful hunt and failure. And today, it seemed, the moment had come. Leo continued his way through the forest, unaware of the danger that followed him. He stopped now and then to nibble on the fresh grass, his ears twitching at every sound around him. His senses, heightened by his fear, caught every whisper of wind, every rustle in the bushes. But there was one thing he failed to notice: the complete silence that had descended upon the forest. The birds, normally so lively at this hour, had fallen silent, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. It was the kind of silence that came just before a storm. Or in this case, before a predator struck. Suddenly, a crack echoed through the forest, and the lioness sprang into action. She moved swiftly, her powerful muscles propelling her forward with an almost terrifying grace. In an instant, she was closing the distance between herself and the young deer. Leo's heart pounded in his chest as he heard the sound of something crashing through the underbrush behind him. His instincts screamed at him to run. But it was too late. The lioness was upon him. In a desperate attempt to escape, Leo leaped forward, his hooves barely touching the ground as he sprinted away from the predator. His legs burned with the effort, but he knew that his only chance of survival was to outrun the lioness. The ground beneath him seemed to blur as he galloped, his fear pushing him faster than he had ever run before. But no matter how fast he moved, he could hear the thundering footsteps of the lioness closing in behind him. The chase seemed to go on forever. Leo darted through the trees, his heart racing, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could feel the lioness gaining on him, could hear her growls growing louder and closer. His muscles ached, his body exhausted from the constant running. But still, he pushed forward, driven by the primal instinct to survive. In a final, desperate bid to escape, Leo darted into a thick patch of underbrush, hoping the lioness wouldn't be able to follow. He crouched low to the ground, his body trembling with exhaustion and fear. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The only sound was his own ragged breathing and the soft rustle of the leaves around him. His body shook with the realization of how close he had come to death. But the danger was far from over. The lioness, not deterred, prowled the edge of the underbrush, her eyes scanning the area. She knew the deer was close. She could smell him, feel his presence. The thrill of the hunt surged through her veins, urging her to find her prey. Leo's heart thudded in his chest, his mind racing as he tried to think of a way out. He had to stay still, had to remain hidden. The predator's eyes swept over the underbrush, and for a moment, Leo thought his time had come. But then, just as quickly as the tension had built, the lioness turned and began to move away. She had sensed something else in the air, something that made her hesitate. A distant sound, the crack of a branch, the rustle of another predator, caught the lioness's attention. She paused, her head snapping toward the source of the noise. For a moment, Leo held his breath. The lioness's eyes scanned the horizon. And then, with a final glance in his direction, she turned and disappeared into the shadows. Leo remained perfectly still for a long time, his body trembling with relief. He had survived. For now, the predator had moved on. But the forest was still a dangerous place. He knew that he couldn't afford to let his guard down. He had come close to losing his life. And though the immediate danger had passed, the wild was still full of threats. And he was still alone. But as the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, and the darkness of night began to settle over the forest, Leo understood something else. The forest was not just a place of danger, it was also a place of survival. A place where only the strong, the clever, and the brave could endure. And though he was young, fragile, and alone, Leo felt something stir within him. Perhaps, in time, he would learn to navigate this wild world on his own. Perhaps, he would survive, just as his mother had taught him to do. With that thought, he lifted his head, his eyes scanning the forest around him. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. But for the first time, he also felt something else, a glimmer of hope. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving the savanna under a blanket of soft twilight. The air was cooler now, the harsh light of day replaced by the quiet hum of the night. In the heart of the forest, the stillness was both peaceful and unnerving. Creatures of the night began to stir, their eyes glowing in the darkness, seeking prey or shelter, each driven by an instinct older than time itself. Leo, the young deer, had spent many days alone, wandering the vast expanse of the wild. His slender form, fragile yet determined, moved carefully through the underbrush, his large eyes scanning the world around him. The world was quieter at night, but there was something unsettling about it. He could hear the distant howls of wolves and the whispers of creatures that roamed the shadows. Every step he took felt like a small risk, an echo of the danger that always lurked just out of sight. Leo's once carefree life had been shattered when his mother was killed in a brutal attack by a predator. Left alone, he had learned to survive on his own. But each day felt like a battle. His heart was still heavy with grief. And every decision he made was colored by fear. But there was something else in him, too, a quiet, burning desire to live. It wasn't just a matter of survival. It was a desire to prove that he could make it in a world that had shown him nothing but cruelty. But Leo was still a child. His instincts were not as sharp as they needed to be, and his body was not as strong as the predators that hunted him. His fear often made him freeze when he should run, and his fragility made him an easy target for those who sensed weakness. However, not all creatures in the wild were out to hunt the weak. Kovu, the mighty gorilla, lived deep within the heart of the forest. He was a towering figure, with massive arms and a chest that rippled with muscles. His dark eyes were filled with wisdom, the scars of countless battles etched into his fur. He had been a protector of the forest for many years, watching over the weaker animals and keeping the balance between predator and prey. His heart was kind, though he had seen the brutality of nature firsthand. Kovu had fought off threats from predators, helped wounded animals, and even stood against other powerful creatures that sought to harm the forest's delicate harmony. His bond with the creatures of the forest ran deep, and he had earned their respect. They knew that if they were ever in danger, Kovu would be there. He was their shield, their guardian. But Kovu, too, was not immune to the trials of the wild. While he was strong and intelligent, he had learned the hard way that survival was never guaranteed. Every day brought new threats, and even the strongest could be brought low if they were not careful. One evening, as Leo made his way through the thick underbrush, something caught his attention, a rustle in the trees, a low growl. He froze, his heart racing. He had been here before, caught in the same trap of fear. He tried to move quietly, hoping the predator wouldn't notice him. But the sounds were growing louder. A pair of glowing eyes appeared in the distance. And Leo's breath caught in his throat. The first thing he saw was the glint of teeth, sharp, vicious teeth. A pack of hyenas, their forms blending with the shadows, was approaching. Their eyes gleamed with hunger, and their low growls sent a chill through Leo's body. The hyenas were known for their cunning and ruthlessness. They didn't hunt in the way of lions or wolves. They hunted in packs, often working together to take down weaker prey. Leo's body tensed, every instinct screaming at him to flee. He turned to run, but the path ahead was blocked by more of them. His mind raced as he tried to find an escape. But the hyenas were closing in. Panic gripped him, and his legs felt like they were made of stone. Just as the hyenas lunged, a loud roar echoed through the forest. The hyenas froze, their ears flicking in response to the sound. The roar was deep and powerful, unnervingly close. From the trees, a massive figure emerged, charging toward the pack with all the force of a thunderstorm. Kovu, the great gorilla, thundered through the underbrush, his enormous hands swinging with strength that sent the hyenas scrambling in fear. His eyes blazed with fury as he tore through the pack, using his sheer size and power to push the hyenas away. He roared again, a primal sound that made the ground tremble. The hyenas hesitated for a moment. Then, realizing they were no match for the gorilla, turned and fled into the shadows. Leo stood there, his body trembling with relief. He looked up at the towering figure of Kovu, his heart still pounding from the close call. The gorilla's presence was overwhelming, and for the first time in days, Leo felt safe. Kovu turned his gaze down to the young deer, his eyes softening. "Are you all right, little one?" he asked in a deep, rumbling voice. Leo nodded, though his voice was barely a whisper. I think so. Thank you." Kovu offered a warm smile, his expression gentle despite the ferocity of the battle he had just fought. "You're lucky I was nearby," he said. "The hyenas are relentless. They prey on those who are weak or alone. But you've got spirit. I can see that." Leo looked up at Kovu, his heart swelling with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he said quietly. "I'm not strong like you. I don't know how to survive in this world." Kovu's eyes softened, his gaze becoming understanding. "Strength is not just about muscle, little one. It's about will, heart, and knowing when to ask for help. You don't have to face this world alone." Leo looked up at Kovu, feeling a spark of hope igniting within him. "But the world is so big. And it's so dangerous. I've lost everything." Kovu's expression grew serious, and he crouched down so that his face was level with Leo's. "I understand what it's like to lose something precious. But you have something that most don't. You have the will to survive. And that's something you can build on. I've been here in this forest for many years. And I've seen countless animals struggle. But the ones who make it are those who never give up." Leo felt a flicker of warmth in his chest, the weight of fear lifting just a little. "You really think I can make it?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Kovu nodded. "I do, and I will help you. You're not alone in this world." "Leo, not anymore," As the two stood together, the moon rose higher in the sky, casting its silvery light across the forest. The night was still dangerous. But for the first time in a long while, Leo felt as if he had found a friend. Kovu had offered him something more than protection. He had offered him hope. And in a world as wild and unforgiving as this, that hope was a gift more precious than anything else. The path ahead was uncertain. But with Kovu by his side, Leo was ready to face it. In the shadows, far away from the gorilla and the deer, a pair of eyes watched. Sefu, the cunning and cruel hyena leader, had witnessed the entire exchange. His lips curled into a sinister smile. The gorilla might have chased his pack off for now. But this was far from over. He would return, and next time, there would be no escape. For now, the forest was silent again. But the tension was far from gone. The balance of power was constantly shifting. And in the wilderness, nothing was ever truly safe. But Leo had Kovu now, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The forest was alive with the sounds of the wild, an orchestra of birds, insects, and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. The air was thick with the scent of earth and life, a sharp contrast to the quiet tension that hung over Leo. The young deer, though tired and worn from his recent encounters, had grown accustomed to the precarious nature of survival. Every moment in the wild was a gamble, a game where the odds were rarely in his favor. But Leo had learned something over the past few weeks. If he could stay calm and think, he might just have a chance. Today, the sun was higher in the sky, and the warmth of its rays filtered through the trees, casting dappled light across the forest floor. Leo was searching for food, his stomach gnawing at him with hunger. The grasses here were thick, lush, and vibrant, a sign that there was something to eat. He nibbled cautiously at the grass, keeping an ear out for any sign of danger. But the forest, as always, was deceptively quiet. Danger never announced itself. It only struck when least expected. Leo's eyes darted around the clearing as he grazed. His senses heightened. The wind shifted, and he picked up a strange scent, one that made his fur bristle. It was subtle at first, a low, pungent odor that sent a ripple of fear through him. He paused, his head snapping up, ears swiveling. There was something in the air, something wrong. The wind shifted again, and then he heard it. The soft, unmistakable sound of footsteps, not the rhythm of a deer or a bird, but something heavier, something dangerous. Leo's heart skipped a beat. He didn't need to see them to know who it was. Hyenas. A pack, to be precise. They were predators known for their cunning, for hunting in numbers, and for their relentless pursuit of the weak. Leo had learned all too well the dangers they posed. His mother's death had been at the hands of a lone predator. But these creatures, these hyenas, they worked together. They were a coordinated, ruthless force. Leo's breath caught in his throat as he quickly took a step back, his body instinctively reacting to the threat. He turned to flee, but the ground beneath him felt like it was closing in. The hyenas had already picked up his scent, and it was only a matter of seconds before they were on him. A sharp bark cut through the air, and in an instant, A hyena emerged from the trees. Its eyes gleamed with hunger. Its mouth open in a cruel grin. It was fast, far faster than Leo had anticipated. The young deer's legs burned with the effort to run. But his body was still too weak, too inexperienced. His heart pounded as his hooves scraped the earth. And the trees around him blurred into streaks of green. The hyena was gaining on him. Leo pushed himself harder, his body straining as he weaved through the underbrush. He could hear the other hyenas behind him, their growls and snickers getting louder with every passing second. The pack was closing in. Leo's mind raced. There had to be a way out. But the forest, for all its sprawling beauty, had turned into a maze of danger. The hyenas were relentless, and no matter how fast he ran, they were always a step behind. The first hyena lunged, its jaws snapping dangerously close to Leo's tail. He jumped, his body propelled by sheer panic, and managed to narrowly avoid the attack. But it was only a brief reprieve. Another hyena dashed in from the side, cutting off his path and forcing him toward a dead end. Leo's legs trembled, his heart pounding in his chest as he realized the trap was closing around him. With a sudden, savage rush, the hyenas surrounded him. Leo's back was against a thick tree, and he was surrounded by the snarling pack. The hyenas circled him, their eyes glinting with hunger and malice. They were close now, too close. He could feel the heat of their breath, the anticipation in the air. The young deer stood still, his chest heaving with each desperate breath. His mind was a whirlwind of panic, his body frozen by the sheer terror of what was about to happen. He had no escape. One of the hyenas, the largest of the pack, stepped forward. Its eyes gleamed with cruel amusement as it studied Leo. "You're not going anywhere, little one," it taunted, its voice low and guttural. The hyena's teeth gleamed in the fading light of the day, a stark reminder of how close Leo was to becoming its next meal. Leo's legs were shaky, his body trembling with fear. He had never been so terrified in his life. His mother had always told him that there were moments when running was the only choice. But now, it seemed that there was nowhere to run. He had no strength left. No hope. The hyenas were too fast. Too smart. They had him cornered. And he was nothing more than prey now. But just as the largest hyena stepped forward to make the final move, a sudden roar split the air. It was deep, powerful, and so commanding that for a moment, everything stopped. The hyenas froze, their heads snapping up in alarm. The air seemed to crackle with the tension of something far greater than the pack of predators. And then, through the trees, emerged the massive figure of Kovu, the gorilla. His powerful arms swung with each step, his eyes burning with fury. He had heard the commotion and had come to the rescue. His arrival was a force of nature itself. And the hyenas, though bold in numbers, now realized they were facing something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. With a single, thunderous motion, Kovu charged toward the hyenas. The pack scattered, not daring to face the gorilla's immense strength. The first hyena that had been closest to Leo turned to run. But Kovu reached out and swiped at it with a force that sent the hyena crashing into a nearby tree. The rest of the pack followed, scattering in all directions, their ferocity replaced with terror at the sight of the mighty gorilla. Kovu stopped in front of Leo, his chest heaving with exertion. He placed a massive hand on the young deer's back, offering reassurance. "Are you all right, little one?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. Leo, who had been frozen in fear, finally collapsed to the ground, his legs unable to support him any longer. His breath came in ragged gasps as the adrenaline left his body, leaving him feeling weak and disoriented. I thought I was done for," Leo whispered, his voice barely above a tremor. Kovu knelt down beside him, his expression softening. "You were lucky," he said gently, "but remember, there will always be dangers in this world. You can't let fear control you. You must stay alert, always." Leo nodded weakly, still shaking from the encounter. He had been so close to becoming the hyena's prey. And it had all happened so quickly. He had almost given up. But Kovu had come in time to save him. As the gorilla helped the young deer back onto his feet, the forest seemed to return to its natural rhythm. The danger had passed, but the reminder of how fragile life could be was etched into Leo's mind. In that moment, he understood more clearly than ever how ruthless and unforgiving the wild could be. But he also understood something else. He didn't have to face it alone. With Kovu by his side, there was hope. The air was thick with tension, every heartbeat echoing in the space between life and death. Leo's heart pounded so loudly in his chest it felt as if it might burst. The hyenas circled him, their eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. He was cornered, no escape, no way out. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. But his legs were frozen, his mind paralyzed by terror. The sounds of the hyena's growls filled his ears, drowning out everything else. There was nowhere to go, no one to help. As the largest hyena approached him, its grin widening, Leo felt a wave of hopelessness wash over him. The predator's teeth glistened in the fading light, and its breath was hot and rank against the cool evening air. Leo braced himself for the inevitable attack, his body trembling with fear. But then, from the dense underbrush, came a sound, a deep, guttural roar that sliced through the tension like a thunderclap. The hyenas froze. It was the kind of roar that commanded attention, a sound that resonated with power and authority. For a brief, suspended moment, everything seemed to stop. The pack of hyenas, accustomed to striking fear into their prey, now found themselves on the receiving end of that very fear. They turned as one, their eyes widening in surprise and unease. From the shadows emerged the towering form of Kovu. The massive gorilla stepped into the clearing with the calm assurance of a creature who knew he commanded the forest. His fur was dark and thick, his muscles rippling with raw strength. His eyes were fixed on the hyenas, glowing with an intensity that made the predators hesitate. Each step he took seemed to shake the very ground beneath him. And his presence was enough to make the pack of hyenas falter. Kovu's eyes flicked over to Leo, his expression softening for a moment before turning back to the hyenas. He knew what they were capable of. and he had no intention of letting them claim another victim today. The hyenas, though numerous, could sense the shift in the air. The immense gorilla was a force they could not take lightly. They snarled, their instincts telling them to retreat. But their hunger and their pack mentality pushed them forward. Emboldened by their numbers, Kovu, with a low growl, stepped closer, his large form casting a shadow over the young deer. "Leave him," Kovu's voice rumbled, his words carrying an unspoken threat. He did not need to raise his voice to command authority. Every inch of him radiated a force of nature that made the hyenas pause. The largest hyena, the one that had been circling Leo with predatory amusement, bared its teeth and growled in defiance. But it was a hollow challenge. Kovu had already proven his power with that single, earth-shaking roar. He didn't need to attack. His presence alone was enough to make the hyenas second-guess their next move. The hyenas took a hesitant step back. Still hungry, still dangerous, but unsure of how to proceed. Kovu's eyes narrowed, and with a sharp motion, he moved forward, pushing one hyena away with a single, swift strike of his hand. The hyena stumbled backward, crashing into the brush, stunned by the gorilla's strength. With each movement, Kovu kept the pack at bay, not attacking but warning. His growls were deep and thunderous, like the rumble of a storm before it broke. He wasn't here to kill. He was here to protect. The hyenas could see that. They knew that facing Kovu would lead to their own demise. But the pack mentality was strong. They circled warily, eyeing the massive gorilla as they tried to figure out their next move. Kovu did not flinch, his gaze unwavering as he turned back to Leo. The young deer was still on the ground, his body shaking, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. But Leo wasn't entirely paralyzed by fear anymore. He could see Kovu standing between him and the hyenas, a living wall of protection. He felt the warmth of the gorilla's presence, the strength of his stance. And for the first time since the attack had started, Leo dared to hope. Leo's legs trembled as he tried to stand, his body weak from the fear and exhaustion of the chase. His hooves slipped in the dirt as he pushed himself up. But the sight of Kovu's unyielding strength gave him the courage he needed. He had always known that he was small and vulnerable in the wild. But in this moment, he understood that survival was not just about running or hiding. It was also about standing up and fighting back. Even when you thought you had nothing left. Kovu's eyes locked onto Leo's. A silent message passing between them. The young deer wasn't alone anymore. The gorilla was here, and he would not let anything harm him. The message was clear. It was time to escape. Leo stumbled forward, his body still unsure but propelled by the flicker of hope that Kovu had ignited within him. He felt the weight of the situation, but he also felt a strange sense of strength rising in his chest. Kovu was protecting him, but it was now up to him to find the courage to escape. The hyenas might have been closing in, but with the gorilla's help, he could break free. "Run!" Kovu's voice boomed, deep and commanding. He wasn't just speaking to Leo. He was speaking to the hyenas too, daring them to make a move. But his words were for Leo. giving him the final push he needed. Without thinking, Leo turned and bolted. His legs screamed in protest. But he pushed himself harder. Ignoring the pain, the hyenas howled in frustration, their sharp teeth gleaming as they tried to pursue. But Kovu stood firm, blocking their path with his massive frame. Each time a hyena dared to get too close, Kovu would swat at them with a terrifying roar, sending them sprawling in retreat. Leo's heart raced as he darted through the forest. His eyes focused on the path ahead. He didn't dare look back. The sound of the hyenas' howls echoed in his ears. But the thunderous growls of Kovu kept them at bay. For the first time, Leo realized that he wasn't just running for his life. He was running for a chance to live, to survive, to find a place in this wild world. Leo ran as fast as his legs could carry him, through the trees, over the uneven ground, until the sounds of the hyenas faded into the distance. When he finally slowed, gasping for breath, he looked back. The gorilla was still there, standing strong against the threat, his silhouette dark against the fading light of the day. Kovu had saved him. Again, Leo's legs were weak, but his heart was full. He had made it, and with Kovu by his side, he knew that perhaps, just perhaps, he could make it through this world after all. The wild might be a dangerous place, but it was also full of allies, if you were lucky enough to find them. Leo took a deep breath, his body finally relaxing as the adrenaline began to fade. He looked up at the towering figure of Kovu, his voice shaking with gratitude. "Thank you." Kovu smiled down at him, his eyes warm. "You're welcome, little one. But remember, strength isn't just about power. It's about knowing when to fight. And when to run. And you've got more strength than you realize." Leo nodded, his spirit lifted by Kovu's words. For the first time in a long time, he felt something new, hope. The forest was dangerous, yes, but it was also full of life. And with Kovu's guidance, perhaps he would one day find his place in it. The hyenas, after a moment of hesitation and uncertainty, finally recognized that they were facing an opponent far stronger than they had anticipated. Kovu's presence, so commanding and powerful, had overwhelmed them, and now, with their pack mentality faltering under the weight of fear, the hyenas began to retreat. One by one, they slunk back into the shadows, their once fierce growls fading as they realized there was no victory to be had here. Kovu, without even having to lay a hand on them, had made it clear that the young deer was not to be touched, not by them. Not by anyone. Leo, still panting and trembling from the terror of the chase, watched in awe as the hyenas disappeared into the darkness. For a brief moment, the world felt still, as though the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The young deer slowly turned to Kovu, his legs shaking beneath him. He was exhausted, but as the realization of what had just occurred sank in, gratitude and admiration filled his heart. He had been saved, he had survived, but more than that, he had been protected by something he never would have expected, a creature that was so different from him, yet so incredibly powerful and kind. Leo's voice was barely a whisper as he looked up at the towering figure of the gorilla. "Thank you, Kovu," he said, his words trembling with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." Kovu's eyes softened, his massive form lowering slightly to be closer to Leo's level. There was no arrogance in his gaze. Only a quiet understanding. He didn't need to speak in grand gestures or boast of his strength. His actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. "You would have found a way," Kovu said gently, his voice like a deep rumble that resonated in Leo's chest. "You're strong in your own way. But sometimes, we all need a little help." Leo's heart swelled with gratitude. And he nodded, his eyes wide with respect for the gorilla. He had always seen strength as something physical, something that could be measured by size or power. But in Kovu, he saw a different kind of strength, a strength that came from wisdom, from kindness, from knowing when to fight and when to protect. The young deer stood up straighter, the fear that had once paralyzed him beginning to melt away. He no longer felt like the helpless, frightened creature he had been earlier. He had been shown that survival wasn't just about running fast or hiding in the shadows. It was also about having the courage to stand up, even when you were afraid, and knowing that sometimes, you don't have to do it alone. Kovu, sensing the change in Leo, gave a small, reassuring smile. "Come with me," he said. "I know of a place where you'll be safe. A place where you can find food and water without fear of being hunted." Leo looked up at Kovu, his eyes filled with both curiosity and gratitude. "You'll take me there?" he asked, a mixture of awe and relief in his voice. "I will," Kovu replied with a nod. "You're not alone, little one, not anymore." With that, the two of them set off through the forest together. Kovu moved effortlessly through the underbrush, his large form pushing through the dense vegetation with ease. Leo, though smaller and more delicate, followed close behind, finding comfort in the presence of his unexpected protector. The forest, once so daunting and dangerous, now felt like a place of potential. With Kovu by his side, Leo had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. As they traveled deeper into the woods, Leo couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Kovu was leading him through parts of the forest that he had never seen before, hidden meadows and cool streams. Places that were safe from predators. Places that seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The air was fresher here, the grass softer, and Leo could feel the tension in his body easing with each step. After a while, they arrived at a small clearing, where a crystal-clear stream ran through the middle, its waters sparkling in the light of the setting sun. The soft rustling of leaves above them created a peaceful rhythm, and the sounds of the forest seemed gentler here. Kovu gestured to the water, then to the surrounding area. "This is a safe place," Kovu said, his voice calm and reassuring. "There is plenty of food here, and the predators rarely come this far. You can rest here, and when you're ready, we'll move on to a better spot." Leo hesitated for a moment, taking in the surroundings. It was more than just a place to eat and drink. It felt like a sanctuary. A moment of peace in a world that had been filled with so much fear and danger. He stepped forward slowly, dipping his head to take a drink from the stream. The cool water refreshed him instantly. And as he drank, he felt the weight of his exhaustion lift. He looked up at Kovu. His voice filled with wonder. "This place, it's beautiful. I've never seen anything like it." Kovu smiled gently, a deep, thoughtful look in his eyes. "The world is full of beauty, little one. You just have to know where to look. And remember, there is strength in finding places like this, places where you can heal and grow." Leo nodded, feeling the truth of Kovu's words settle in his heart. He had been running from fear for so long, constantly trying to stay ahead of danger, that he had forgotten to pause, to take in the peace that the world had to offer. But now, in the presence of his protector, Leo had found a moment of calm, a moment where he could breathe without the fear of being hunted. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the meadow, Leo felt a new sense of safety. The danger had not disappeared completely, but he had learned something important today. The world might be wild and unpredictable, but there was also kindness and strength in unexpected places. And with Kovu by his side, he wasn't alone. The end. Leo's heart swelled with new understanding as he looked up at Kovu. The gorilla had shown him more than just how to survive in the wild. He had shown him that strength could come from kindness. And that protection didn't always come from the fiercest creature. Sometimes, the strongest among us were those who knew how to protect. Not just with force, but with heart. The lesson that Leo had learned that day was simple but profound. Strength was not only about power. It was about knowing when to fight, when to protect, and when to offer a helping hand. The wild was harsh, yes, but in that harshness, there was also hope. And in Kovu, Leo had found a true friend, someone who, despite their differences, had proven that even in the animal kingdom, there could be a bond that transcended species. Strength doesn't just come from muscles. Kovu had said earlier, it comes from heart and from knowing when to stand up for those who need help. And now, standing in the safety of the clearing, Leo realized just how true those words were. Strength was more than survival. It was about connection. It was about protecting one another, no matter how different you were. As the last rays of sunlight faded into the horizon, Leo turned to Kovu with a grateful heart. "Thank you," he whispered once more, the words carrying all the gratitude he felt in his soul. "For everything." Kovu nodded, his deep voice rumbling softly. "You don't have to thank me, little one. We all need someone to protect us. And I'll be here for you, as long as you need me." The two of them stood together in the quiet of the forest, the night beginning to fall around them. They were different, yes, but in that moment, they were not so different after all. And in the wild world they called home, they had found something rare, a bond of true friendship, forged in the heart of the wilderness. Final message: strength does not come from muscle alone. It comes from kindness, protection, and the bonds we form with others. In a world that often feels wild and dangerous, we all need someone to help us, to stand by us. And in those moments of connection, we find our true strength.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.